Good afternoon, Dave, Mark,
Hello.
Stacy. Nice to see you this afternoon.
You too.
Hello.
With you. Hi.
Dave Comer, thank you for joining us.
You
Yeah,
bet.
how's it going?
Good.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, Mark.
Dave, should we give it a couple more minutes before we start, or you want me to fire
Uh,
things?
Why don't we wait a minute, John, and see? We don't have a big crowd, so
Hello.
Okay. Looks to me like we have 11 participants so far. It looks like we started recording, so that's good. We can post this on the Berks Alliance website when the recording complete.
and I've been able to share screen, Stacy, so you can show your PowerPoint.
Like your background, Stacy.
Thank you. Is mine back? Mine's correct, right? It's not backwards. I always get these
No.
like mixed up.
No, it's right. It actually, it coordinates with your blouse, so it almost looks like you're sort of color coordinated.
Coordinate. Yeah.
And we have to say the same thing about Mark's, John. His is exactly the same background.
Oh, nice. Nice. I wish I could get the people in my organization to do that, including myself.
Okay, why don't we start?
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining the call today. This session is all about addressing transportation to work challenges that we have in the Berks County area. And of course, we have some really experts in this field that have helped other communities across the country. So we're really delighted to have our panel. And we plan to have some presentations up front. And then Dave is going to moderate some questions at the end, and we're hoping to have some questions. So I'll just remind everybody, when you're not speaking, if you could put your PC or whatever device you're using on mute. Also, to the extent that you do have questions, if you can put them in the chat, that would be most helpful. So the impetus for this meeting grew out of a community forum hosted by the Berks Alliance in collaboration with the 3rd District Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia that focused on the challenges that workers and employers face in securing reliable transportation. The research found that these challenges were occurring throughout the Philadelphia Reserve District region, and the survey to which your organizations responded was really a joint effort between commuter services. When you work in the computer business, you tend to see that word as computer. But a joint effort by commuter services, the Berks Alliance, and the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance to understand better the challenges for transportation in our region. So about Computer Services of Pennsylvania. Computer Services of Pennsylvania is a program of the nonprofit Susquehanna Regional Transportation Partnership. The partnership is a collaboration of mass transit authorities across the southern central region of the Commonwealth, and it includes BARDA locally. It's funded by the Federal Highway Administration and PennDOT. Through free consulting services, Commuter Services works to reduce traffic congestion, including reaching out to employers to create options that allow workers to commute to their jobs safely and reliably. So we're going to have 3 presenters today. Stacy Newcomer is going to be first. Mark Estat is going to be next, and then Dave Myers is going to moderate the Q&A session of the meeting. So Stacy is the Deputy Project Manager for Commuter Services. She has served in the role for 8 years and oversees the outreach efforts to all employers and community organizations within the local service area. In this role, she works to educate commuters, employers, and community organizations on options for commuting green to work, such as carpooling, van pooling, bicycling, walking, taking public transit, and of course, telecommuting, which is quite in the vogue now during COVID. Mark is the Employer Outreach Manager for Commuter Services. He served in that role for 10 years, working to lower traffic congestion and improve air quality in our region. He's worked with dozens of companies during this time to make sure the employees have access to free commuting programs that help people save money, help our environment, help them find reliable transportation to work, give people a range of choices for green commuting. He's a graduate of Messiah College, and Mark has also worked in higher education and behavioral health sciences. Dave is the advisor and consultant to the Berks Alliance. Over the course of his career, Dave's worked in higher education, healthcare, state government, and he's held senior management positions in all those organizations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to kick things off.
Perfect. Sounds good. So you want me to share the screen, Dave, or were you going to?
Yeah, if you go ahead, then you can control moving it.
Okay, let's see if this is working. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to kind of talk about is start with the survey results themselves, because that kind of will dovetail into the conversation and kind of give everyone an idea of the data that we gather. I know not everyone could make this call, but we did have about 25 employers who completed the survey. So we appreciate the time that you took, because it really gives us some insight into, what's going on in your world as far as transportation and recruitment, retention, things of that nature. So just starting off here, and I apologize if I'm looking back and forth, I have two screens. So the call's on this one and the presentation's on this one. So some basic information. So we asked, how many employees are at your location? And as you can see here, a bulk of it is 54% are have 100 plus employees. So we have some, larger size employers that are part of this conversation. And then we also asked, how many shifts? As we know, a lot of people have 1 shift, 2, 3. There were some responses that just said multiple, because they just have so many different shifts. But this here was actually kind of an even split between having 1, 2, and 3 shifts. This other chart I kind of put on here, and while you may not be able to read, I'm not sure how it shows up on your screen, all of the times across the bottom, the times themselves are not necessarily important. The important thing to kind of take away from this slide is the variety of shift start times. So when we're starting to look at transportation options and transit options for employers within an area, one thing is looking at the shift start times, because when you look at this and you can see they're all across the board, that's when it becomes difficult to try to, work out a transit route. And that's where employers need to be flexible on maybe changing some of their shift start times, which, we'll kind of get into later in the discussion. But again, as you can see, we have it from 5 a.m. all the way up to 11 p.m. as far as a shift start time, and it kind of varies within the region. Then we kind of got into and we asked about open positions. How many open positions do you have currently? And again, as you can see, it's not a lot. The bulk of them are between 1 and 15 open positions, but 96% of those that completed the survey have an open position. And again, here's the chart on those shift times. Now, I'm not sure if anyone wants to type in the chat or just kind of speak out. I like this to be more of a discussion roundtable. I really wish we could meet in person, because I really like the interaction being around the table. I'm kind of curious with the open shifts or the open positions. Are these positions that are open due to COVID, or have these been open positions prior to COVID that you've just kind of always struggled with? Because I think that's a really good insight to kind of, as we move forward with this, is it due to the current COVID pandemic and that's why positions are open? And if you don't want to, take yourself off mute, maybe type it in the chat box, or just kind of hold that in the back of your minds as we get to the end where we have more of an open, discussion about that. Then we asked about transit usage. So we asked if there's a transit stop. at your location? Yes, no, or you're not sure. So of the 25 employers surveyed, 33% of them actually said there is a transit stop that's located near or close enough to their place of employment where their employees could use the bus. And of those, 34% are actually being used, which is great. When I look at that, I look at, well, we could also look at educating more. So those employers that currently have a transit route, we could look at educating those that aren't taking it to how they could take it. But then as far as filling the open positions, we can look at where is the transit route coming from? Where are you trying to recruit from? Are you recruiting from areas where the transit is already existing? Because the transit route is already there. Let's look at where we can kind of recruit employment, employees from. The other part we asked is, go ahead, was somebody gonna say something?
I was going to say, someone did say that they opened positions prior to COVID-19.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. Thanks, Mark. So of those, 42% do not have a transit stop near their location. And of those, 72% think it would be a benefit if they had a transit stop at or near, their place of employment, which is kind of why we've all been brought together here, is to kind of work through and talk through what that would look like. Is it feasible? Then we got into the flexibility of shifts. As I mentioned at the beginning, when that first slide of all those different shift times, that's a lot to take into consideration. And so as an employer, if you're able to be flexible in what time your employees are starting, it's going to go a long way with the feasibility of providing transportation solutions to your place of employment. So, and the survey results were really great. 78% of those who took the survey are willing to allow flexibility in their shifts. Well, so we're already on a great start to kind of, working through this conversation. Then we asked if you're willing to offer a subsidy to your employees. So a subsidy is basically, as an employer, you would be willing to put a portion of the cost towards your employee to purchase a transit pass. And that's a little across the board. 64% said maybe, and I understand that, not knowing what those costs would look like, how many employees would be taking transit, but seeing the 64% maybe, and the 18% yes, you're open to it. So again, we're on the right path of working through this to see what solutions we can come up with. Then we also asked about subsidizing a route. So that would be for the actual employer to put money towards, a new transit route. And again, 52% said maybe, 9% said yes. And I know a lot of that depends on what does that look like? What's the cost? What's involved? Because there's a lot of, back components on that. But just having the open-mindedness to think, yes, I'm willing to subsidize a route or subsidize a transit pass or change the flexibility in my employee shift time, I think we're off to, a good start with that. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but we did just kind of ask, other transportation concerns, challenges, and we'll kind of, that question we're going to bring up later as more of a roundtable discussion. But just a couple of the things that, people put, more stops and easier ways for folks to get to work more quickly as opposed to multiple stops, transportation throughout the county to the factories, the large employers would be important, step towards a more stable and thriving economy. So kind of see the same things, kind of going through there. So that's kind of a recap of the survey results. I'm going to pause for a minute and see, does anybody have any specific questions or maybe a thought or anything that kind of jumped out at them regarding the results that I just went through before we move on?
Stacy, could you go back to the slide that shows when the shift changes were? Thank you.
Yep.
I think that is really helpful and very revealing.
Yes, it definitely is. And this is not all of them, because honestly, there were some responses that just said multiple, like they have so many different shift start times that for them to probably list all of them would have been a lot. So this was just of those that put a specific shift start time. But again, it kind of really gives you an idea of the variety of what's going on with the employers, in Berks County here.
Yeah, I think one of the issues in Berks County, just as I talk to employers, is that it's so difficult today to fill positions that you almost have to accommodate when the workers can come and when they need to leave. So I'm not surprised to see this, spread of shift start times simply because I think that increasingly employers are having to offer a flexible schedule if they want to find people to occupy sufficiently the number of positions that they have open.
Mhm.
And Stacy, I know we didn't include this as a slide, but there is some geographic distribution of the people who responded to the survey. And there seemed to be pockets of places where there were employers sort of not directly adjacent to each other, but close enough to each other that they could create some sort of more critical mass. Is that?
Yes, and I did take a look at that because again, that's one thing, when you're looking at all these employers, if they're all spread out throughout the county, sometimes it's a little harder to kind of work solutions for all of them. But if you have pockets together, then we can maybe bring together smaller groups of those employers in a specific area to kind of target. So yes, we did look at that, and we can continue to look at that. If there's other employers that join this conversation, I'm willing to kind of put together that map and look at where they're all located, because that will really give you the bigger picture of, what we're looking at throughout the county.
And it can even be helpful if you as an employer know, hey, these are the other large employers right around me, and I know they're not here today, letting us know, because it maybe then we can reach out again, where then we can work together with multiple employers in one spot.
Mhm.
Good. This is very helpful stuff.
Okay. So I think next, we're going to kind of talk into, I'm going to take a break from talking. I don't like to continue to listen to myself. I want to listen to some other people. I'm actually going to ask Mark to kind of talk about and share some stuff that our staff has been doing within in some other areas. And then I'm hoping maybe Dave Kilmer from BARDA could just maybe talk a little bit from the transit side as far as, this whole group and, next steps and, what's the best way to reach out to them or to kind of proceed from here and what he sees and has done in other areas as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for right now.
So I'll find out when and where it is.
Mark, you muted.
Mark, you're on mute.
Sorry, there we go. All right, so I will just let you know a little bit about some of the things that we have done with commuter services and other places in similar kind of situations. One of the things we worked with Lebanon Transit, creating an express route from downtown Lebanon out to Jonestown, targeting 3 specific employers. And it started with doing on-site surveys, so we can get a sense of where the employees are coming from when they're getting there and if there'd be interest in a bus route. And once the route was started, we held try-it days to help promote the route. Riders received a free bus pass when they participated in that beginning, and then held new hire presentations to promote the route, as well as then ongoing promoting through TV slides, flyers, table tents, and new hire materials. And another one we did with LT was to do a presentation entitled Sustaining Transit. And the goal was to get 3 employers to contribute towards the cost of running a route to their area. And in the end, only 1 agreed and, kind of improvising, then we were able to extend a route to that employer rather than creating a new one for the 3. But it was working together to get that. And then also at ES3 in York, they did all of that background again with surveys to find shift times, commuting origin, and interest in a bus route through in-person surveys at shift meetings and during breaks. And once the route was established, there was a 2-week push with in-person tabling events for employees to sign up for discounted monthly bus passes that were subsidized by the employer. And then ongoingly, there was information about the Emergency Ride Home program, which is available as well through commuter services on TV break room screens and in the lobby. And then I did also have the experience of working with an employer who kind of called us in after the route was set up and to try and help promote it. And what we quickly found, talking to the employees when we came in to promote it, was that more than 85% of them had to start work too early to take the route. And so we kind of thought like, all right, well, there was kind of a missed opportunity here. So some takeaways we found as we've gone along is that as soon as you're starting to think about, hey, I need to think about some of these transportation issues, get us at Commuter Services and BARDA involved as early as you can in the conversation, so that we can help pave the way to make some of those obstacles that might pop up. We can kind of avoid them right from the beginning by getting things done. Also is that we can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. All those surveys, marketing, events can all be put together and pretty much run on our end with just a little bit of help from you. So it's not this extra huge thing on your plate. We can be doing a lot of that for you. And then also, once something is established, we can be helping you ongoingly to maintain what's working and create or expand on new ideas and initiatives. So, you know, anytime you're thinking about these things, just give us a call and get us involved so that we can kind of help you out right from the beginning.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Sure.
I know during, some of our internal conversations, Dave Myers and John, they brought up about the initiative in Lancaster, and that's what Dave Kimmer, I didn't know if you'd be able to touch on that. Our internal conversations, they kind of were interested in hearing a little bit more about how that worked with Four Seasons and that out there, to see if it's something that could, be replicated, or how would that look in Berks and whether it's feasible.
Yeah, so what we did was working with the Lancaster Chamber and with some of the employers up around the Turnpike area where we didn't have bus service, and they had a lot of open positions, same issues with the multiple shifts. It was Four Seasons, Produce, and High Concrete. High has since kind of bailed out of this a little bit because they haven't been able to really get the people, and I think their business is down a little bit. But what we did is we set up a van service with our carrier that we contract with for our paratransit service, because we already had the vehicles, they already had the employees, and the times that they needed were basically third and early first shift. I mean, they had some really bizarre hours, I think, for shifts. Shipping produce, I don't quite understand why it needs to go out at 1 in, but I guess it does. So we started running almost 10 trips a day, 5 in the early morning, starting at like 11, 12, 1, 2, and 3 in the morning, and then picking up again later in the day for the return trips. We've since narrowed that down to 3 trips in the late night and 3 during the day because of the demand, and they found we just can't keep providing service for either no people or one person. Because what we did is we kind of set it up like a bus route where we had 4 pickup points within the city of Lancaster. And they were hitting the neighborhoods and targeted areas that had the higher unemployment, and working with some of the community groups in those neighborhoods and the city, they were able to get the word out and help with and they were doing recruiting right in those neighborhoods. So that really helped out a lot, I think, for getting the people there. And then once we go around and hit these 4 spots, then it's just an express service right on up the Four Seasons. And we kind of worked it, looking at the cost. It was, at the time, we were looking at about $108, $104 an employee. So what Four Seasons did is they did a pre-tax $10 a week from the actual employee, and then Four Seasons made up the rest. And what we needed to do is get it up to at least the same cost recovery level as our regular bus service to help justify continuing the service. It hasn't quite got up to that point yet. We're still working on it. Fortunately, we had enough funding that we could do that. But it's and we went through this exercise even in Berks County 3 years ago when we were doing our TDP update. We worked with the chamber, tried to do surveys of all the businesses, and like deja vu, here we are 3 years later doing the exact same thing again. But part of the problems we always have, of course, is, everybody needs to remember, we are a public authority, which means we're publicly funded, which means we don't get enough money to run a bus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week along every road in the county and serve every business. We have to go where the densities are and where the high employment areas are to justify it, because we get evaluated by PennDOT and the feds on our performance. And in PennDOT's case, they're almost getting to the point where if we're running a route that's unproductive, they may stop funding it and say, well, if you feel it's necessary, then the locals need to pay for it. And unfortunately, that's the way we've gotten to with public transit. But this is something I've been doing my entire career, and I'm in my 42nd year of transit. We did a similar thing when I worked down in Virginia with to Colonial Williamsburg and Busch Gardens, the amusement park. Same issues. The jobs were in Williamsburg, the employees were in Newport News. Busch Gardens subsidized the entire service. They found that the people that rode the bus that entire summer were their most reliable employees, and they saved a lot of money from having to constantly recruit, run ads in the newspaper, go out and do targeted recruiting efforts, and just the general cost of turnover, which I'm not sure a lot of businesses really take that into consideration when they're looking at, well, they want me to fund a bus, but I can't afford to do that. But somehow everybody can afford to keep turning their employees over and spending the money to try to get them. So it's like I said, it's been the same cycle my entire career. I've seen this happen. The other thing too that everybody needs to realize is that, like a bus route, just think of yourself being on an airplane. If you're flying from Reading to Florida and someone says, well, I need to stop in North Carolina. Well, that's fine, but how much more time is that going to take? Who's going to pay for the added cost of that time? And is it worth it for one person?
Right.
And that's what happens. I understand the need, and we've had some perfect examples up there with Amazon opens up a brand new facility that apparently nobody knew they were even going to be in, calls us a week before opening, say, hey, I need bus service. It's like, sorry, I can't turn on a dime like that. Our funding just doesn't allow that.
Dave, can I bring up an example in Berks County that we just learned about?
Sure.
As we were developing this program, from the time Stacy and John and I and Mark got together to do this till essentially about a week or so ago, we were contacted as Boscos was very interested in sitting down and participating in this program. They're unable to join with us today, but they said that they very successfully, I don't know how long they worked with you, I don't know what they did to do it, but they said they were able to get a bus stop that served their needs working with you. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we worked with them for almost a year. Not because that process took that long, it's because after we talked to them, all of a sudden we didn't hear from them for a year. Then they came back and said, hey, we're having a real trouble. And then Godiva Chocolate, which is right next to Boscov's, actually came to us right after Boscov's did, like a year later. And this is a case where you have two businesses that are literally 2 blocks off the bus route. So it wasn't that tough to take the bus into it, particularly at the times they wanted, because it was later in the day. So in a couple of cases, it was like the last trip in at the end of the day. So that's not a big deal to deviate for a block or two. But yeah, we were able to do that in January and hit both of them, Godiva and Boscov's, because they were right. It's easy when they're right essentially on the bus route.
Mm-hmm.
When you get businesses like Amazon that's 6 miles from the nearest bus route, it's a little more difficult.
I was on a call earlier today with a county agency that works on property development, and they said that they're on the verge of selling a property by the Reading Airport that is off of Route 183, where there is a bus route.
Right.
They're about a half mile down the road with no sidewalks and stuff. And so I suggested that maybe there's a need to have this conversation with you at some point, it's going to be a fulfillment center similar to some of the other ones that are happening in Berks County. And they're going to be trying to recruit employees from the city of Reading. So you may get a contact from them at some point over the next 9 months or so.
Okay.
To
Yeah,
talk about
we
that.
used to deviate back into that area behind the airport, so that's not
Not a challenge.
yeah, that's not as big of a challenge. And that's not a heavier route either, so it's a little more easy to do those things.
And I'm just doing random thoughts and then we'll get to the questions here. So I'm sorry to hijack the meeting, but we did a community forum recently with a group called Tech Centro, which is a Latino workforce development organization that's coming into Reading and going to be working with the Latino population in the inner city to train and educate people in the workforce to try to help them create businesses, but to train them for the sorts of jobs and stuff that are out there in the community as a way of trying to increase employment. And it strikes me that maybe we want to have a conversation with them, with you, Dave, Stacy, with you and Mark at some point, bringing all of you together to talk about how we can go about linking people from that site where they're going to be getting workforce training to where they might be employed down the road. Would that make sense?
Yes, we have a relationship with Tech Centro in Lancaster County. So we have done some of that and done some work with them, so we could definitely connect.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the questions. And Stacey, I think you're right. We can just let people open up their microphones if you want to respond to these questions. We sent the questions out in advance to try to stimulate some of this conversation. And so for those of you who are joining us as employers, can you talk, each one of you, maybe talk a little bit about what are the transportation challenges that are facing your organization and your employees? And I don't want to call on people, so we just open your mic and talk. Carl.
Well, I'm a staffing service, so I'm not one specific company.
Right.
But the challenges we tend to have, one that's probably not solvable, I understand Dave's point of view, is some of our clients are just so far off. They're in the middle of nowhere. They started as little mom and pops, and now they're these big food manufacturers, and they need all these people, but they're nowhere. They're in Hamburg or in Wilmersdorf, out in the middle of nowhere. But we do have a number of companies where the bus services them all week, but then they have Saturday and Sunday shifts, and it doesn't service them then, and our employees are stuck.
2 points I think you raised. One is the time of week or day of week when the service goes, but also, and I think this, Dave, might speak back to what you raised. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional bar to bus. It could be some other sort of transportation, van transportation, if it's a smaller thing, as long as it's reliable.
Well, if we have adequate numbers, I mean, like I said, we can't afford to run a taxi service.
Right.
I mean, there's taxi services that do that. We're here to move the masses, so to speak. But even in a van, if we can get 4 to 5 people in a van, that's great. Even on a Sunday, the service in Four Seasons is 7 days a week.
Carl, would that help?
Sure. Yeah. Then our challenge is we've got to get our clients to buy into it.
Yeah,
Right.
Understand.
Yeah. I can't be left holding the entire bag, but I can certainly try to do our share.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a unique perspective in the sense that we're a tiny drop in the bucket as far as employment is concerned, but we serve individuals who are seeking employment to gain stability and exit homelessness or housing insecurity. And one of the biggest barriers for them is certainly transportation. So my question, I guess, to the group is whether there have been any studies, thoughts, or collaborative efforts to take a look at, I guess, I don't know how to phrase it, but cost benefit analysis, if you will, of increasing transportation versus the cost of some of the social services that are provided, and how transportation barriers are an impediment to housing security and employment. Just because I think that when you have that kind of data, you have a stronger standpoint to kind of argue increasing funding for transportation and other things like that. If you're taking a look at where funding is going, and could we reduce the need somewhere, and then offer that as a cost benefit analysis, if you will, for increasing funding to transportation.
It's an interesting point. Where are the people that you're serving, Lise, and where are they trying to work, or where are they working?
Throughout Berks County, on average, we serve anywhere from 600 to 500 individuals per year. We're central downtown Reading. However, again, we serve the whole county. Traditional feedback that we get, they want to be able to participate and be employed in that second, third shift because there's a higher pay rate. But then, the bus doesn't go on that route at a particular time, or the connectors are a factor because you have to have long waiting periods between connections. Somehow the screen just popped off, so I thought I had exited
You
the
lost-
Zoom. I thought I lost you guys. I'm
We're
still
here.
there.
And Elise, if
but-
you want to, sorry,
ahead.
it's Mark from Commuter Services. If you want to reach out offline as well, I can let you know some of the ways that our services might be able to help with some different potential transportation options for clients as well.
Elise,
Wonderful.
do your clients come to a single location? Or do you-
Yes, at some point in time, they do end up coming to our downtown location, North Fifth Street.
How do they get there? They have transportation issues.
Not so much. We're easily accessible for most of the people that we serve, but when you start to talk about the outskirts and the suburban areas, certainly getting to us or employers is a factor. We have a couple of programs, not just homelessness, but we do cover things like eviction and utility shutoff. So oftentimes those are people in the outskirts of the county who may not be able to access services. So we have to kind of accommodate them virtually, things like that. But transportation barriers exist in all corners of the county. So I was just curious if we could maybe put some thought into a deeper analysis. And I get that it's complicated and everything is very connected. And once we pull on one string, everything starts to look overwhelming. I just think that if we make that ask to have, more extensive routes, more funding to transportation, that we would see that the benefit would pan out in other sectors that we didn't necessarily consider at first.
No, that's a very good point.
If I could, I like that.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, this is Dave Kilmer again. This is an argument I've been making my entire career. Every time they try to go to funding for public transit, I say, well, how come you can always find funding for welfare and to fund people on welfare, but yet when you cut our funding, 80% of our riders typically do not own automobiles. So when you cut our funding, those people don't go to work. If those people don't go to work, what option do they have to do except go on welfare? So how come everybody's so anxious to increase funding for welfare, but cut funding for public transit?
Well, I won't argue.
Everybody
that
always
there-
gives me a dumb look like, geez, I never thought of it that way. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's the realities of it. And unfortunately,
Well,
there has to be a sea change in the way everybody thinks that, and I've seen it coming for the last 10 years, is now we're being measured on, oh, we have to perform. If you don't have 25 passengers per hour, then you shouldn't be running that bus.
Right.
But what's the
So I
social
just want to
implications
add real
of
quick. I
cutting
just want
that
to add real
service?
quick. I would not necessarily argue that there isn't a growing need for social services and supportive services and basic safety nets. However, I would encourage us all to kind of work less in silos and look at how everything is correlated
That's a good point.
expense-wise.
But are there some other people on here who, frankly, I can't see your faces, so I hope you're still here. But Deborah, Rob, Dylan, do you want to weigh in on what challenges you're seeing your employees face? Or John, you're an employer? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I have somebody banging on the outside of my house who's trying to fix a leak in one of my windows. Well, I did answer the survey, and we're primarily sort of a flexible environment. You know, I work in the information technology business, and my team members kind of come and go. Usually, most arrive between 6 and 9 in the morning, and most leave between 3 and 11. The vast majority of our team members come with their own personal automobile. We did have some carpooling that kind of got shut down with COVID. So most people that are coming to the office are coming by themselves today. We have a few people that come on the bus, and fortunately, where we are located in Wyomissing, the bus comes right down Crossing Drive by between Home Depot and Best Buy and the Crown Plaza. So we essentially have a bus stop right across the street that makes it easy for our folks to come and go on the bus. And that route is pretty frequently traveled. So there's lots of access for us. So I would say I don't have a problem at the moment. We've shifted also a lot of our, and I know that many employers can't do this, but we've shifted during the pandemic a lot of our people to remote work. So we have a lot of telework in our business at the moment.
Deborah, do you have any challenges that your employees are facing?
I think the biggest challenge that we have is that we're one of those employers that has a ton of different shifts. Because we're a bakery, we kind of have a phased operation. So in some instances, we have flexibility on shift times, and other times we don't, because we're starting at a certain point, and we start mixing, and then we start assembling and baking. And so it's kind of a process, and we have all these different shifts, and we have 3 shifts. So I think the biggest problem that we see, I'm not an employer with that second shift that ends in the early morning hours at like 1 a.m. So that second shift is really the hardest. That group that works like 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., just the availability of transit at that time, that morning time. We have some 5 a.m.ers that start too. That's kind of hard for them. Most of our employees live in the city. We have a lot of walkers. So it's mostly those that live on the opposite side of the city that are using the transit to get here. So
how many employees are you talking about in that 5 o'clock start shift?
probably about 40. If we have
So
to
it's a
shift
big
full.
number, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on that question? And we sort of got to whether or not there's public transportation near where you're working.
Hey, Dave. Jim
ahead.
Gerlach, just not from an individual employer standpoint, but a question that comes up relative to some discussions we've been having recently about development that's occurring in certain corridors of the county. There is a major employer that's looking at doing a new facility up on Route 222 in Maxitani. As you know, Dave and John, we at the Development Fund are selling property in Onalani Township that's going to result in some major industrial uses in those areas. to Stacy and Mark, is there a process that you're aware of or you engage in that when you see developments occurring, particularly commercial and industrial developments occurring, that you're immediately in contact with those companies to let them know of your interest in commuter-related services for their employees and how you can work out programs with them to get their workforce to them? And so you're starting that conversation early. And as they're developing their business in that location, part and parcel of what they're talking about is how to get their employees there and to and from there through shared ride, through bus services, et cetera. Is that part of the process today? And are you finding in Berks County in particular, you have opportunities when companies indicate they're going to locate along the I-78 corridor or put in a new facility at 61 and 73 or going to do something at 222, that very early on in their process, they are going to have a conversation with you about the possible need for commuter services for their employees?
Definitely. We would love to get involved as early as possible. And we often in our staff meetings, someone will be like, hey, did you see, there's this new thing I heard it's going to be by next fall. They're going to be open in this new location. And we do our best to reach out. But, for us, it's somewhat of a cold call sometimes or a cold reach out. And so having any contact with anyone, so if it was through the chamber or through the Alliance, to say, hey, this is happening and we can connect you to the right people. That's great. And just one example is up on 78 when the, I think it's called Berks Park 78, where Dollar General and PetSmart we were involved with them. I believe BARDA was involved as well, right from the beginning, to at least talk about the options and work through. And we've continued to work long-term with Dollar General and off and on with PetSmart. But yeah, it was better to, right from the beginning, be in there, because then you can kind of present to the, they're saying their needs. And then from our side and from BARDA, it can be like, hey, yeah, this is what we would need to make it work. So we would definitely love to be in those conversations. So if you are aware they're happening or you're connected in some way and can bring us into it, that would be great.
One follow-up point to make. The county has a process, because it's something that's going to be started in one particular development that's being talked about in the county, where the county puts together a process, and you can look at it as almost an Operation Warp Speed type process, where the county facilitates conversations between the county, the local municipality where the development is going to occur, and the company that wants to go there, where they will work on issues concurrently for approvals that need to happen, land development approvals that have to happen at the township or municipal level, county oversight and county decisions that have to be made. So they try to work out a process to do that concurrently rather than first the municipality, then the county. So you speed up, you expedite the process overall to get the development approvals accomplished. It would seem to me in that agenda that's part of that county process could be included the issue of commuter services for employees, so that if it's on the list of issues that have to be talked about in that discussion process, that would be an opportunity to have that issue raised, thought about, and considered at that very, very early period, and as part of the process that happens each time those developments go through that county/municipal process.
Yes, that would be a huge benefit, for us to get in, during that. As Mark mentioned, we try to get in during the early stages, but we also realize that there's a lot going on when a new building, new construction, everything goes in. Sometimes transportation is not the forefront, and they have other things going on. We try to get in there to really make them understand should be thinking about transportation from the beginning, because as you start that recruitment, it's very easy for us to go out and say, here are your transportation options. If there's a bus route available, we're promoting that, and we can tell them, here's where it stops, here's where you pick it up. Then if transit's not available, we look at our other options, carpooling, vanpooling, biking, walking, if it's feasible and safe. So if you can get us involved in conversations like that to be brought in from the beginning, it would definitely be kind of a win-win for everyone, I would think.
Yes, it sounds like we can create a link from what Elise was talking about in TechCentro and the people like Carl through to the development organizations who are doing these things, maybe we can create a sort of clear path for people to connect and deal with this issue up front rather than Dave waiting until it gets late and then telling you we need a bus tomorrow.
Well, we're actually working on a brochure of our own, and we're calling it Design Us In, that we can get out to all the municipalities. So when they're approached, they can give a new developer this thing. It's like, don't wait until you build a thing and then ask for bus service. Or if you want it from the beginning, then make the allowances for it. PetSmart and Dollar General are perfect examples. They were working with Dennis LaWorse at the time when they were first going in. And then when I came up to Reading, I went out there and looked, and it's like they made absolutely no provisions to have a bus serve either one of those facilities.
Hmm.
We were going to have to drop the employees off about a quarter mile from the front door.
Yeah.
So it's things like that, you know, if you're taking a bus, it's like, well, why would I want to do that when the people that are driving cars get to park 10 feet from the door? But if you ride a bus, you got to walk a quarter mile.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get over those hurdles and have us, you know, have people look at that. And particularly like at all these box developments, like the one for Amazon, that was being done by a developer on speculation who wasn't allowed to tell who their tenant was going to be.
Mhm.
So that was a case where we didn't know until they actually opened.
Mhm.
And so there was, even if we got to them, I'm not sure there was any way they would even talk to anybody because they wanted it to be a secret that they were coming there. So we deal with those things too. I understand, you know, developers are like that and some businesses are like that too. They don't want anybody to know they're coming there until the last minute for
Right.
whatever reason. But
Dylan, you're unmuted, so I'm hoping that means you want to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna kind of, you know, speak to the situation at Amazon there, and you know, what everyone's been saying is pretty, you know, is accurate, you know, to how that went and you know how I was brought in to approach it too, and you know, I worked with several of you, you know, on trying to get, you know, some bus service up there. And, you know, I think the hard thing that I've been faced with is, you know, Amazon is very data driven as a company. And so, you know, there's kind of a cost benefit question that is just hard to answer with transit sometimes. So, you know, wanted to get something in place for site opening, you know, wasn't able to. And so unfortunately, you know, I think we're kind of in the position where we're needing to be a little reactive now. And, you know, the cost benefit emerges more after a facility has been opened and, you know, is starting to face some of the problems with hiring and retention. And, you know, that's sort of where we are now. I think one of our, you know, one stumbling block with selling transit for a facility like ours is that our shift times can be subject to change on pretty short notice, you know, where the business need will call for, you know, calling overtime or, you know, adding an hour at the end or at the beginning of the shift. And, you know, sometimes we get, you know, 24, 48 hours notice that that's going to happen. And that makes it harder to want to fund transit, you know, knowing that if we do so, we're going to have this certain population of our associates who would then be, you know, unable to participate in some of the flex times that, you know, we're called upon to do by the company. And, you know, it's a hard question to answer. And, you know, it's not something that's specific to this facility here. It's something that we face nationwide. And it's not insurmountable necessarily, but it's difficult.
Have there been any other locations in your orbit that they've done something like this to deal with getting workers to work?
Well, I do know that.
Yeah, I mean, in some
other
cases.
Amazon
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Let Dylan talk for Amazon.
Well, I was going to say in some cases where, we do know that need for, flex time is more acute or most likely to happen in November, December, in our holiday period is when we're typically busiest. 2020 was the exception because pandemic orders. But in a normal year, we do see the need most acute there for November, December. So in some cases, we might be able to get that extra bus run just set up and have it running for November, December. So we don't really have to worry about, the flex times. In that case, transit service is already running. We know it works. When there's a short-term need, say it happens for a couple days in April, where it's possible, we've even set up, just a real short-term program for targeted at those folks and just to set them up with an Uber ride. It's not anyone's favorite option, but it does work.
Mark, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying we do work with some Amazon locations outside of Berks County. Candy specifically, who is in a similar position to me. And I'd have to ask her specifically if there are any transit options, but they're doing quite a few other commuter services options at those locations. So it's something we can certainly connect. Our emergency ride home program would at least be a little bit of help when you have kind of the unexpected overtimes as well. But those are things that we could talk about in more detail too.
So maybe there's some way that we could arrange to, Dylan, have you guys connect with commuter services? Maybe there's a way for the Greater Reading Chamber to be a broker of that to employers who want to work with this issue. Would that make sense?
Yeah, let's definitely keep the lines of communication open. To be honest, I was hoping, that someone from operations on site there would be able to join in today too. But, unfortunately, it's just been me. And, full transparency, I'm actually based in Seattle and, supporting several dozen of these Amazon facilities in the Northeast. So, again, it makes it tougher not being there on site.
No, we appreciate the fact you joined us, and we know it's a small crowd today. We're going to grow this audience, and it's not going to stop today.
So I have a crazy idea. I've been trying to think outside of the box about how could we solve this problem. It seems to me that we're going to increasingly have a workforce that needs to flexibly work, either for the convenience of their employer or the convenience of the worker or both. So how about if let's assume we could find a big pot of money someplace, and we went out and bought 1,000 electric cars, and we placed them at 10 different locations around the county, and we sort of started something that would be kind of a cross between Zipcar and Uber, where an individual would have an app on their smartphone, and they could go to one of these 10 locations and sign out a car, and forget about who would pay for it, but sign out a car, and the car could, within limits, only go to the location of their employer and could only go back to one of those 10 lots. Now, obviously, a constraint there would be that the individual would have to have a valid Pennsylvania driver's license, but the cost of electric cars is going to come down very, very quickly, particularly as many of the major automobile manufacturers start competing with Tesla and a few other people that are making electric cars. But could we drive the cost down sufficiently to make something like that? A pool of electric cars that would have limited range and limited capability to deviate from a selected route. What's wrong with that idea?
Well, I'm going to just put a thing in perspective there. And I know, John, you're an IT guy, but I deal with all light industrial workers mainly low-income Latinos. And these guys don't even have cell phones. So all these people that think technology is going to solve the world, these guys are so poor, they're sharing cell phones. I don't even have legitimate ways of getting a hold of some of these people. So people look at me like I'm nuts when I say that, but I got 300, 400 people that apply with me a month yet, but they can't get to these places and they don't have the technology that people think they do.
Right, but we could, part of the package could be to enable them with technology. Dave and I are working on another project. There's a huge digital divide in our county where we have lots and lots of people that don't have access to broadband internet. And, it really puts them at a significant disadvantage. And especially during a time when children students are working from home, they're really disadvantaged when they can't, get on Zoom to go to school. So, I agree with you, Carl, that, we have to assume that a lot of the folks that want work and looking for work are not digitally enabled, but, maybe part of the employment package is the employer provides them with a mobile phone. There again, the cost of smartphones is coming down considerably and quickly. I mean, not if you want to buy the luxury Samsung or Apple phones, but there are lots of other manufacturers that are making somewhat smartphone enabled phones.
That's not a bad response too, because you might be able to sell it as a package of making them stay with your company if you pay for their cell phone package.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, I even in my industry and the associations I'm with nationally and other peer groups, everyone's like, technology is a solution. I'm like, these guys don't have the technology for you guys to throw out these tools for their use.
Well, in my career, I've tried to solve problems using the least amount of technology possible, and I found that that's often the best solution. But I don't know. I just wanted to share that idea and see if that couldn't gain traction somehow, and if Mark and Stacy couldn't and David couldn't kind of work that over and see whether there wouldn't be some way to do something, do a very unusual and out of the box experiment in Berks County.
It's an interesting idea, John. The lots would have to be close to where those workers live because they're not going to trudge 2 miles to a lot to pick up a car. A car would have to be available to them every single day. Otherwise, they won't get to work. So there'd have to be enough cars in the lots to serve the folks. And I would assume that because the cars would be owned by some entity, some corporation, then legally those drivers would be considered permissive users of those vehicles under the Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle Code. But then the corporation that's lending them those cars every day would be legally responsible for their driving habits. Yeah. So you'd have to make sure that whoever uses the car, their driving record has been checked. There's not problems with their driving record, because if they were to get into an accident using one of those cars, when they have a bad driving record, then the corporation might be legally responsible for whatever accident or damage occurs from that. So, a lot of legal issues around it, a lot of practical issues. But with that said, it's an interesting idea to consider.
And I'll throw another idea out to somebody maybe like Jim, who's got some pull with insurance companies. As a staffing service, we could offer transportation and have done it in the past with clients, and some clients have even paid for it. But as soon as the insurance companies found out, they kibosh it, because if I have an accident with 15 people in the vehicle, I'm done. But it worked successfully for us. I had the company in Wilmsdorf where we were running a van for a year and filling it up every day. But the insurance companies kiboshed it, and the insurance companies kind of hold sway over everything.
We do van pooling with third-party providers, though, where that wouldn't be an issue. You wouldn't provide it, the third party would. And the agreement is technically between the riders and the company, and the riders and the rideshare company.
Mm-hmm.
So
my insurance.
The insurance, but the insurance isn't on your company if you use the third party, as opposed to you hiring it out or paying for it in that way.
Yeah, we have to be
Providing
careful.
the
how we present it.
transportation, you're liable, but if it's not provided by you in that way, the liability is not on you.
Yeah. I have to be able
And
to
help with that.
I have to be able to introduce it as an option, but I can't be part of setting it up.
You can be the owner, yeah. Rob Rosenberry, I don't know if you're still on, but do you have anything you want to add to this conversation? Or Ellen Albright? Ellen, I know you do workforce stuff.
Yeah, I work with the Berks County Intermediate Unit, and while I'm not sure that transportation is a large barrier for a number of our current employees, I think in my role, I was just looking to join this conversation as a means to, with the labor market being so tight, and with the number of vacancies that we do have, is there other strategies to consider that will help us address those vacancies? Potentially offering, just like Mark was talking about, third-party organizations with van services, take advantage of some of the potential candidates within Reading, and help give them a means to come to us.
Good point. Ellen, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Sorry, I was in transit myself, so I just parked.
Yes, we'll
But
retreat.
my interest was just to listen today and kind of hear, obviously from Stacy, the outcomes of the survey, and specifically within my world, I work a lot with the manufacturing folks here. So if ever there's a need to kind of dive in and further survey, or we are often in contact through our Next Gen industry partnership. So, if something comes up, just kind of being that convener and sort of channel to bring that information to the table, and vice versa, to get it back out to them as well.
Okay. One of the points that's been made is that about the needing to sort of critically mass some of the places that we could work with to address this concern. And obviously we have a limited number of people on the phone here, but are there places where there are enough employers with employees who we might be able to start with a strategy to try to address this? I don't know, Deborah, are there other employers close to you? There are a few. There.
Yeah, I think there are. I think there's pockets of employers, city, that could work together.
In looking at this, and I'm sorry, Dave, if I'm going to take away some of your other, questions, is what have you guys done to kind of maybe look at solving this problem of getting people, to work? I know everyone wants a bus route and everyone wants transit there, and as Dave has talked about, it can be done, but it's not feasible for every employer, and it doesn't work because they can't take the bus, to every single employer at every single shift time. So I'm just wondering, have you guys tried anything else internally? What have you tried? Has it been successful, or are you just starting the conversation and thoughts now to see what options are available?
Don't everybody jump up at once.
Maybe no one has tried anything. And part of all these conversations and discussions, we work with BARDA, and so we're obviously always promoting transit when it's available. We realize it's not available for everyone. So, Mark and I, we look at other solutions for these transportation challenges and issues, and that's carpooling, and, that's the van pooling that Mark talked about, biking and walking when it's feasible, because we do have a lot of organizations that reach out because they're trying to recruit and they're having issues. So, we can offer some other solutions in the interim, that as this conversation continues, and if, transit is feasible at some point, we would ideally want to shift people, that way. But in the interim, we can kind of look at other solutions and other things. I wasn't involved in this conversation, 3 years ago, as Dave mentioned. So I don't know what happened then, or, I don't know, Dave, if you want to talk to, like, what would you recommend, like, next steps for this group as far as if we
Yeah.
want to look at something? Mark and I can have individual meetings with employers here. We can, look at where your current employees are. I can do some maps. We can survey your current employees together, their input on whether or not they would take transit. I know they've already found a way to get to work, but if they're driving alone, can we educate them on taking the bus?
Before we jump to Dave, I want to sort of build on what you're saying, Stacy. I think one of the challenges probably is that people and business leaders are thinking about operating their business and aren't thinking about, geez, are my people having trouble getting to work and what's the reason why? So part of what we may need to do is how do we expand this discussion to include other people? Dave, go ahead. Tell us what happened 3 years ago and why you think it worked or didn't work.
Well, we kind of basically had the same conversations we're having now. And 3 years ago, we actually didn't get a lot of participation from businesses. I don't want to say just like now, but almost just like now.
Yeah.
In contrast, in Lancaster, we had, like in that Denver area, that Four Seas, we started out with a group of about 12 employers, all within the same area. And that's the strategy I think that works the best, is when you can have groups of employers in areas. And like in Reading, I can tell you, we added service along the Route 61 corridor because I saw, 2 years ago, all of a sudden, all these warehouses were just being built mostly on speculation. So we're thinking, well, when they open up, there may be a need for bus service. So we increased service up 61. Most of them are just getting ramped up now. I mean, they're just starting to get occupied and starting to get ramped up. But I mean, that's what it takes, is because it's tough for the small businesses where you only have 3 or 4 openings, or there's only a pocket of 10 over here. And, Boscov's and Godiva were perfect. I mean, they were right next to each other, and they both kind of independently came to us, and we're able to work something out. I mean, if it's something close, you can work directly with us and we might be able to do something. But if it's in an area that we're not serving, it's going to take a group of businesses, I think, to come together and see if there's a mutual need and a mutual solution that'll work.
And this is definitely a way that you can use Stacy and I. So if you're like, well, maybe I don't sound like I'm initially in one of these spots that might work, then let's have a conversation. We can survey your employees and see where they're coming from, and how are they getting there, and what are the issues. What is the interest? If it was there, would they take it? And then even start to, hey, what employers are around you that we can connect with, so we can kind of bring some of those things that are going to be in the conversation no matter what. Once we come to Dave at BARDA, so can we say, hey, we do have interest. We have riders. We think if we do it, and here are some of the things we've worked out, so we can try and work on some of those things ahead of time before we try the conversation. That's what I always say when I'm talking to people about transit. That's like, we see people monthly in our board meetings, or bi-monthly from the transit agencies, and we know what they're looking for. That doesn't mean they'll do what we say, but but we can bring them as much of the info that we know that they're going to need ahead of time. And so, that's our job, and it's free. So it's a service that you should take advantage of.
So I saw, I don't know, in the chat here, at least posted this question: have the unemployed or underemployed pools of workers been polled to gauge the impact transportation barriers have on their ability to gain employment? I don't know if anyone can answer that.
Stacey, have you done that in other communities where you surveyed workers, or you surveyed training agencies? You talked about working with Tech Centro.
I've done primarily surveys of employees at an employer site, to gauge interest of how are they currently getting to work? Would they be willing to take transit? How far away are they living? I haven't done anything specifically for, unemployed or underemployed. I don't know if anyone on this call would have that kind of data or know where to get it.
So I'm on the Workforce Development Board for Berks County and a member of the CareerLink Oversight Committee. So I am not aware that that has been done. But I think maybe if the folks from Commuter Services were to get some engagement with the Pennsylvania CareerLink, they work with the youth programs, the underemployed, the unemployed, and there may be some connections that could be made through that.
Yeah, we can help put you in touch with the people here in Berks County.
You don't need to. I have worked long years with CareerLink, but
Oh, okay, good,
I'm not
Mark.
doing this kind of survey, but I monthly interact with their earn clients, who are people who are on government assistance, who are in like a job skills training, aiming to get them into employment. And so we talk to them about employment options every month. And then I interact with their staff as well. So their staff's pretty aware of our programming, but I haven't, no one has ever kind of thought like, hey, maybe we should survey this specifically. I can tell you anecdotally that both the clients that I talk with and similar, I work with CareerLinks in 2 counties. I work with several different reentry programs for people coming out of prison. I've talked with a few organizations probably similar to Elise, where they're trying to really help people who are having these issues on different things, and then transportation is a big part of it. And every organization is like, yes, transportation is a barrier, both to employment, or sometimes, as Elise said, it can be even a barrier to getting an address, because you have that catch-22 of I can't get a job without an address, but I can't get an address without a job. I've even worked with a company that was trying to work on that and helping people find housing as they were starting at their job, so they could get both. But I think it would be interesting to connect with the CareerLink and see if we could maybe do something where we can come up with data rather than just kind of anecdotal stories.
Well, we sort of taken on talking about next steps. I don't know. There are lots of good thoughts here. What do we do? How do we keep this moving?
If there are surveys out there that you guys utilize to poll workers, I'm happy to actually include that and even bring it up to the network of social services providers to see if we can poll the clients that are seeking employment and gauge, those barriers in a concrete way. Certainly, we have case notes of it and we report on it as far as outcomes and data. But a survey that we report back to one of you as an entity would certainly be something that could be a starter.
And one way that we can help, since we do surveying a lot, I am just working with an organization that has had a lot of success in getting good returns on their surveys, where they're getting 40 to 70% of their employees to engage with their surveys, is that they're doing a QR code. So you can literally just scan it with your camera on your phone and it will come up, and we try and keep them short, just a few questions that they could do in under a minute. And then the data comes right, online, where we can collate it pretty easily. So even if it's something you want to develop, but then you'd like us to help you in setting it up or do the, the QR code and setting up the survey, we could do that as well.
So that's one.
And I would say, we had, I think it was 25 people completed the survey. Obviously, not everyone's here on this call. I think in order to continue the discussion, maybe we need to reach out to those individuals that completed the survey. Right. And I think maybe have individual meetings. I realize that sometimes when we all come together, not everyone wants to kind of speak up, and I get that, based on their, situation and what's going on. They just, they kind of want to absorb and they want to listen. So sometimes on those one-on-one sessions, we might be able to get a lot more information and details. So I think continuing the conversations maybe on individual levels where, Mark and I can come in and we can kind of really evaluate what's going on regarding transportation at these work sites. And then we can start to map out where these employers are, where their current employees are. And then, back to Dave Kilmer's point, that would give us an idea of, do we have pockets of employers already together that are willing to, look at this, or are they so far spread out that, bringing transit in at this point is not really worth it to do that and looking at that way. So, I mean, that's kind of my recommendations as far as some next steps to take.
We can work on that. How do we get Amazon employees to Amazon's facility? Dylan, what are you guys doing?
Hey, right now, we're really just leveraging private automobiles, and we don't have a whole lot of options for folks at this particular facility. Nationwide, we have a lot of other different facilities that do have programs, be it, funding transit, subsidizing rideshare, or we have some experience with van pooling. In general, we found van pool works best for, family units. We have a hard time getting good long-term van pools in place for our fulfillment center networks. At this particular facility, RDG1, go ahead.
No, could you get us contacts locally that we can maybe reach out to them about and put them in touch with some of the workforce people and maybe begin to survey some of the employees that they're hiring, or to see what we can do about addressing this challenge with them? I think you have 2 facilities in Berks County, if I remember right.
Yeah, absolutely. We do, that's right.
Well, we're a little past the time we told everybody we'd keep you. So we will send the PowerPoint out to everybody. We'll send the recording of the video out to everybody who registered. I think we've got a couple of good ideas. I'll try to frame those into a very short follow-up sort of thing. It's a tough challenge, but it's an important challenge, I think, that we've been trying to wrestle with. And there's no easy solution. If there were, it would be done.
Yeah, and when you send all that out, Dave, if you want to just include contact information for Mark and I, and then, anyone is welcome to reach out to us individually to continue these conversations. But then, I assume Dave Myers and we'll get together again internally to kind of chat through more of this.
Okay, thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to do this. And it's good to see living people.
I want to do one more quick plug just in case people are interested. I know John said he has a lot of people who are teleworking. We're also doing a lot of telework work lately, and we are starting an ongoing kind of conversation for companies that are dealing with it now, either who haven't dealt with it at all except in the last 10 months, or people who've long-term, but we know going ahead, a lot of companies are still going to be doing it. We do have a monthly meeting that's going to be starting next week. So if you do have any interest, just let Stacy or I know and we can let you know more about that.
Okay. John, any final comments?
Yes, I thought we had a very lively and productive conversation. I think we created a foundation for continuing to chat. I'm open to anybody who will help me find the money for my 1,000 electric cars. If we can get the cars, I'll figure out how to get over the legal hurdles, of which there are some we talked about, and I'm sure tons of others that we didn't talk about. But thanks to Dave, thanks Mark and Stacy, and for presenting and being part of this conversation. I can't underscore, and I know I don't need to say this, but I can't underscore how critical finding transportation for people to get to work in Berks County really is. We have so many unemployed and underemployed people in the community, and we have lots and lots and lots of jobs. I'm sure Carl can just attest to the fact that he's got hundreds of openings that he can't fill every day. And what that means is lost productivity to our companies, lost income in our economy, and really holding back our employers and our workforce because we can't make a reasonable connection. So this is among the larger challenges that's confronting our community, and we need all collectively try to think outside of the box and come up with some really creative solutions. I know we can, because the need is so great. So thanks, everybody. Have a super rest of the day. And the Berks Alliance has these community conversations all the time. Our regular community conversation is on the third Thursday of the month, starting at 11:30 a.m. And you can find the schedule of those on our website at berksalliance.org.
Thank you all.
Thanks, yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.